Hiya, Tony here, hope you're well. I have got a special guide for you today. It's a what to know before you go to Weston-super-Mare. Now, first question probably is, why Weston-super-Mare? Of all the places in the world, why this little seaside town in Somerset? Well, two reasons. Number one, it's my hometown. So rather than talk about somewhere amazing and far-fetched, I thought I'd go home and see where it all started. The second reason, I recently watched a video by a channel called Turdtowns on the worst places to live in North Somerset. And it's a great video, by the way. I'm not knocking the video, fantastic. The guy chose Weston-super-Mare as the worst place. I mean, Weston is pretty rough, and I would probably give it to Bridgewater, but you know, I'm going to say that it's pretty fair to say Weston isn't the best when it comes to reputation. However, a lot of people still come here on holiday, so for those people, there are some hidden gems in Weston-super-Mare, and today I'm going to talk you through some of the fun things you can do in Weston-super-Mare, some of the best spots to eat, some of the best spots to drink, and also some of the best things to do in terms of day trips. So if you are coming to a turd town such as Weston, you need to make sure you're going to have a good time and enjoy yourself. So what the heck, if you are coming, check out some of these tips and try to have some fun. Weston-super-Mare is a town about 140 miles to the west of London, nestled away just past Bristol, Bath, and opposite Cardiff, the Welsh capital. Now, Weston is a fairly big town, considering it's just over 82,000 residents. That's the last census in 2021. The history of the place, there's quite a lot of stuff around the Iron Age and lots of forts and that kind of stuff, but pretty much the town really got its name in the Victorian era as a seaside paradise. Well, so the advertisers would have you think. And the town benefited from some fantastic rail links, all thanks to Isambard Kingdom Brunel. So easily the Great Western Railway that runs all the way from the southwest straight to London. And in fact, the chances are you are likely to either drive down or still get the train to Weston Station. So it's fair to say the boom years of Weston-super-Mare are well and truly behind the town. However, it does retain a certain element of traditional slash tacky British seaside culture and vibe. One thing to avoid in Weston is spelling the name wrong. First of all, it's Weston, not Western Supermare. The S in super is also a lowercase s and not a capital. So if you pronounce it or spell it wrong, it might be a little bit annoying for the locals. Now, Weston is famous for quite a few things. They used to have T4 on the beach here, not anymore, so that's a shame. That was really good for the economy. The bouncing bomb was tested by Sandpoint, I think it was, so a little bit of history. We talked a bit about the beach already. There are some famous people from Weston-super-Mare. Lord Geoffrey Archer of Weston-super-Mare, John Cleese, he was from Weston-super-Mare, and Jill Dando as well. And in fact, the cover to the Oasis song, what one was it, Roll With It, was taken here. I'll insert a picture. American icon Bob Hope was also a baby in Weston-super-Mare. I think Diana Dawes got her big break in Weston-super-Mare. And last but by no means least, Roald Dahl went to school in Weston-super-Mare. Some other fun facts about Weston: it's one of the few places to have three piers. Well, I say three piers, we're going to go and see Birnbeck Pier a little bit, but you have obviously the Grand Pier, which is this one, the famous one that's sort of burnt down, and they did it back up, so it's all kind of a little bit more modern and funky. There was the old Sea Life Centre, which is over there. It wasn't official Sea Life Centre, I forget, aquarium or whatever it was, but now that's a cafe. Okay, let's get to the basics. Coming to Weston-super-Mare, as I mentioned, a lot of people will probably drive down. There are, however, pretty good train options. You can get trains from the north and London, either direct, or sometimes you've got to change at Bristol, which is a little bit annoying. It's worth checking out the train times beforehand on that point, because you can get some direct trains straight through from London, which is really useful. But in terms of the link trains, they are probably about once an hour, if that. So you may get caught out in a delay, or if there's a problem or a cancellation, you'll be stuck at Bristol. So keep your wits about you on that. But the train station is pretty straightforward. It's not that far from the centre. You come out the station, you head across the road towards Tesco, you turn left, and you walk perhaps a matter of minutes, and you are at the seafront. So it is a very convenient location to get to the main drag. I should also have added, sorry about that, that there are ticket barriers at Weston-super-Mare station. So if you are going to get a train, make sure you've got a ticket because it's going to be hard to get out of the station and they may well fine you. You'll see the town hall, and then you just go another block or two further along, and you are straight by the first thing we're going to talk about, which is Weston-super-Mare Beach. Now, the beach is probably the most famous aspect about the town. As I mentioned, there's been quite a few fun things to happen on there down the years, but it is a very long beach, and in the summer, it's actually quite pleasant because the sands are nice and golden. So the way it's laid out is you sort of have the Grand Pier in the middle there. To the right of that tends to be the dog walking section, and then to the left of that is the main drag. And you go all the way up past the Tropicana to uphill, where it's a lot more rugged, and they do sort of some of the water sports, sand dunes, and that kind of stuff. Of course, there is a promenade that runs the entire length of the beach, so you can walk from one end to the other. It can be quite a nice walk on the pleasant day and when the tide is in. We'll talk about that in a little minute. So you can go pretty much straight the way along. You go past what was the aquarium, which is now a cafe. I've not been in there. And then you get to the Tropicana. The Tropicana was huge back in the day. It was an open air swimming pool and very glamorous indeed. However, it has been closed for quite a while, although it does open occasionally for certain exhibitions. Like the Banksy had an exhibition there, and there was the Sea Monster, which was a disused oil rig they erected. And I went, there was an ice rink. So apparently that's obviously every Christmas too. So at least they're using that and not leaving it to go completely to pot as they have with Birnbeck Pier, but we'll come to that later. Now, this section of the promenade is particularly useful if you are driving. There is a great many parking spaces listed the entire length of this part of the promenade. So, apart from really crazy days, like if there's an air show in town or an ale festival or something like that, you may find plenty of spaces to just get your stuff over the road straight to the beach. And I should also mention as well, parts of the beach do open for parking. So it's never usually too much of a problem. Just keep an eye on the tides because what you don't want to do is go have a nice day, go out for a drink, come back, and your car's in the Bristol Channel. One of the unfortunate things about the promenade is that it does attract quite a lot of dog walkers, and some of whom are not particularly responsible. This trip for me wasn't the worst, but there was maybe a few bits of dog excrement on the way that the owners don't clear up. So there's nothing like having feces around to say, we love our town, we love our area. So please do pick it up if you can. Of course, we also have problems with litter and general maintenance and things being run down, plus homeless people. There, of course, is a bit of a challenge in Weston that it is a rehabilitation centre. I think it's got the highest per capita number of addicts or something like that in the whole of the country. So, unfortunately, it does get a little bit rough and ready in certain places. Please be very careful when coming down here. When the tide's up, it's okay, it's safe, but when the tide goes out, there is a lot of mud, a lot of sinking mud, and so many people get into trouble when they come here, thinking that it's all perfectly safe. They go out wading, and before you know it, the lifeguard needs to be called, and people are in trouble. So make sure you stay away of that. Here I am on the beach the next day, low tide now, so I've come at low tide, and we're going to see just how far out the tide goes. Weston actually has the second longest tidal range in the world, so you are going to either see the tide up close and personal, or it's going to be a long blip on the distance. But as you can see from the quagmire conditions, don't think you're going to get out there safely. The Grand Pier is the centre point of the promenade. It's had its ups and its downs, but certainly since the fire of, I think it was in 2010, they've improved it. It's now got lots of rides on it, obviously machines and cafes and all that, so a lot more modern. It should be a good way for a family to spend a day. However, in terms of spending a day there, you often have to pay to get on. I think there's some clauses for it after certain times, so I don't like that. It's a bit annoying, and I always just enjoyed getting on there for free back in the day. Opposite the Grand Pier is a pedestrianised square with a nice bit of greenery. They tend to have a carousel there, plenty of fish and chip shops and restaurants and souvenir shops, that kind of stuff. This is also the area with the main arcades, or the mugs, we used to call them back in the day. This is Regent Street. This runs from the pier into the High Street in Weston. It's not quite what it used to be, unfortunately. I remember there was a lot more in terms of arcades. Mr. B's, for anyone who grew up in the 80s or probably early 90s, that was brilliant. It had not just an arcade, they had a fantastic little fun factory style play area, which was brilliant. The arcades are still there, but now they mainly seem to be focused on slot machines and those penny drop kind of machines, which is a bit of a shame because I do remember coming here as a kid. I used to love coming here and playing Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat. And it was just such a fun time. Like I just remember getting the bus from Whirl, where I lived, getting the number 5 bus coming in. And what we'd do is we'd go around the arcades, we'd spend some money on some fun packed machines. We would then probably get a lunch from the Chicken Inn, and just a bag of chips. Couldn't afford much more than that. And then maybe we go and watch a film, and that was fantastic. That was my Saturdays. I just loved all the flashing lights and all that. So nice little twinge of nostalgia coming back here. So heading back out to the seafront, we return to the Grand Pier and then we turn right. This is an interesting area. This is sort of maybe where more of the sort of hotel guest houses are. The Winter Gardens is there. I'm not quite sure what they do with the Winter Gardens anymore. I think it's something to do with Western College, so perhaps someone could inform me. The iconic Cabot or Cabo, which is now a Weatherspoons. This was the most infamous pub in Weston. I don't know why it was infamous, but it was just the place to be. It can get a little bit lively in there over a weekend, discos and all that kind of stuff. So you keep walking along the promenade past the little harbour on your left, and you get to Nightstone Island. Now, Nightstone Island has quite a little soft spot for me because it's where I learned to swim. That's where the swimming pools were when we were kids, and we'd go along to that at school. This was fun because it's the first time I ever saw a vending machine. So we should like take 10p along and buy a chocolate bar after swimming, which made sense because it was cardio and I need to recharge my energy. Mostly apartments now, but it's got some good views across the bay. And then you turn to the right of that, and there is Marine Lake. Marine Lake is a man made lake. As I said earlier, Weston has the second longest tidal range in the world. So, having a little section of the seafront in which you could have permanent water to bathe in was a good idea. Now, down the years, it's been pretty neglected and got a reputation for very dirty and unsafe water. I'm not quite sure how it is now, but I know last year, the year before, they dredged it, and actually, you can see the bottom. You can see some of the water. It seems very clear. So hopefully, there's that's the case going forward. And you're not going to get, I don't know, dysentery or something like that if you go paddling in it. There are two reasons I like Marine Lake. Just as a kid, I found it super exciting to go across the walkway that runs between Nightstone Island and the mainland. I just thought it was like so exciting and adventurous. I obviously lived a bit of a sheltered life. Obviously, be very careful about doing that at high tide because it's going to get slippy and dangerous because it's quite rocky down the right hand side. The other reason I've appreciated a bit later in life is that if you go in the evening, because the sun sets that side, and because it's very still water, you can get some fantastic photos as the sky reflects onto the water. We now enter the last part of the seafront, which is the neglected part around Birnbeck Pier. Birnbeck Pier is probably one of the saddest stories about Weston. Once brilliant Victorian hub for transport and entertainment. It ferried people over from Cardiff because you couldn't drink alcohol on a Sunday, so they'd come over here. Birnbeck is the only place in the whole of Western Bay, I think, that does stay within the tidal range. So it was also not only good for cruise ships or cruise ships. I don't think they were cruise ships; they were paddle steamers. Or there was a cruise ship there when I went, strangely enough. It more so the RNLI. I remember going to Birnbeck as a kid, so I think it must have been left derelict for however many decades it's been. But it's such a shame because if they actually renovated it and did something, and I did see apparently in October there was talk of £10 million grant, but they really need to get this sorted because there's so much they could do with this. And unfortunately, all the area around it's got a little bit sad and a little bit depressed as a result because obviously not much traffic comes through here in terms of tourists. Birnbeck is a symbol of Weston. It's a symbol in a literal way as it being an iconic landmark, but also a symbol of how once great, thriving entity has slowly but surely started to dwindle and fade and fall into disrepair. And a lot of people who should care don't seem to. Yeah, tragic. And as Turdtown attests to, Weston is a pretty depressing place. Certainly in terms of the economy, it's obviously very seasonal, but the high street is really bad. It's suffering terribly. Lots of the big brands have gone. Lots of sort of budget bargain shops, vape shops, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's not the most happening of places. So let's have a little stroll along the high street. You have the Italian gardens to the right, which is actually quite nice in summer. That on the left used to be an Argos. Now, as you can see, it's a Maxi Save. So good they had two X's in it. Obviously, a couple of derelict shops, unfortunately. A charity shop. We always like the charity shop. And a German doner kebab. Oh, yeah, this is reminding me of all the stuff we used to have. Actually, the best on the left there's Walker and Ling. That's probably the best shop in terms of at least you can get some decent designer clothes. I remember coming down as a kid to Western Town Centre, and I was always quite excited. There was always some good shops on the high street, some music shops like they had R Price, and obviously Woolworths was there. WH Smith is still there, so that's where I'd always go and buy my VHS videos. But even sort of around the back of people can't remember. Maybe is it Jackie's junk store was it? And there was always the indoor market as well. They had a used video stalled in there, and it was. So I got some absolute steals in there. I found like Alien Special Edition, which had been out of print for a long time. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame that it's kind of all gone downhill. You're not going to find very many big name brands on this high street. A lot of it is towards, with due respect to them, the lower end of the market, the kind of Trespass and Mountain Warehouse kind of brands. There is a long list of companies that have exited. Marks and Spencer's had a big shop that went. What was CNA became Wilco, and obviously Wilco went under too. Okay, so we've just entered the Sovereign Centre. Now, I remember when the Sovereign Centre was announced and open. It was super exciting that Weston-super-Mare would get a shopping mall. A shopping mall. Well, unfortunately, it's not much of a shopping mall. There's the sort of stuff you might find in like Claire's Accessory, Clinton's, Bon Marche or Bon Marche, Citizens Advice Centre. There you go. That's just what you need. But yeah, this is like a lot of places in Western has kind of withered away and has become it's not empty obviously, but there's not much there to really excite any customers. But the Sovereign Centre is very useful for one thing, and it's the public toilets. If you are coming to Western, lots of the toilets on the seafront, or most of them, or all of them, I didn't check, I can't verify, but a lot of them certainly are pay as you go, pay as you pee. So if you don't want to start forking out lots of money to go for a wee, then pop along into the Sovereign Centre and use the facilities here. There's the disused, abandoned Wilco. So, in summary, if you are coming to Weston-super-Mare for a break, then you can get stuff. There's obviously functional things like supermarkets and pharmacies and some basic stuff for clothing, but do not expect to come here for a shopping spree. I realise this has been very, very negative so far, and I did try and start off with a positive tinge. So let's go on to what you can do in Weston to have some fun. Well, there is some good news, which is there are a few reasonable amenities in Weston-super-Mare. Let's start with entertainment. Weston has actually got two cinemas. The first cinema I should say, was the Odeon, which very sadly closed, but it has new owners and has relaunched as the Plaza. I really have a important place in my heart for Odeon Weston-super-Mare. I used to come here as a kid, and always just remember looking up at the lights and waiting for them to dim to know that the film was going to start, or at least the trailers. I also did my work experience here back in 1994, so I'm glad to see it stayed open. The second cinema is a Cineworld, so obviously a big chain and a lot shinier and newer. This is located in Dolphin Square, which was a semi kind of entertainment complex idea that kind of never really got off the ground, but it does have a few things around there, such as some couple of restaurants and coffee shops. The Alas, a few more closed shops. But this area, Dolphin Square, is famous or infamous for anyone from Weston of a certain vintage for the 10-pin bowling alley, the AMF, which was another place that was important to me as a kid. Some really good memories of that, obviously torn down now. However, it took a while, but they have kind of got a slightly more underwhelming version of 10-pin bowling in this place, the All Stars Sports Bar. This is, in fairness to it, I like it. You know, it is bowling. You can go bowling. You can play pool. You can have a few goes on the arcade. It even has a fully licensed bar. So that's certainly something that you can, I'm sure, could spend a bit of time passing away the hours. Obviously, we talked about the pier and the arcades. Another thing you can do is go to the theatre. There's a few theatres around in Weston. There's that small one we just walked past on the Dolphin Square. There is one called the Blake Hay, which is tucked away on a back street towards Grove Park. And then, of course, if you go to the top of the high street, you will find the biggest of the lot, the Western Playhouse, which does occasionally get some big names there. Now, I want you to remember this part of the high street and the theatre as a landmark, because whilst this road is a little bit underwhelming and somewhat grotty, there are a couple of gems here for drinking. So we'll come back to that a bit later. If you want to go to the museums, there's the Western Museum, there's the Lambretta Museum, there's, of course, the Helicopter Museum. You've got a few other good activities for the kids. There's crazy golf, couple of good crazy golf courses. There's the water park, the Western Wheel, which I think is a seasonal thing, kind of like a mini version of the London Eye. That's it's not here, obviously, at this time of the year. There is also some fun to be had on a walking art tour. Rather strangely, because I don't think Western had a rich heritage of art, there's been quite a lot of street art cropping up over the last 5 to 10 years. My guess is that was the influence from Banksy with his Dismal Land exhibition. I'm going to be honest, say some of these artworks are really good. Not only really good, they do bring a bit of colour and a bit of character to the town centre, and they haven't been defaced or graffitied over. So this is quite a fun thing to do, and also you don't even have to sort of in a particularly organised way. You just have a wander around, and boom, you'll come across whether it's a little Spider-Man or an entire building with a geisha on it. It's going to be fun hunting down the artwork. Weston also has some nice green spaces, a few nice parks. There's Grove Park's probably one of the nicest. That's got a really nice bandstand and pond. It's also got a memorial garden to Jill Dando, which is a bit of a shame because it's somewhat tired and run down. I'm not really sure it does the best job of preserving her memory. There are obviously more things you can do in Western, but that's a flavour of some of the highlights. Talking about flavour, another thing would be where to eat. Now, Western does have quite a lot of the usual sort of fast food places, cafes, greasy spoons, and fish and chips, but there are certainly some good places to eat, and I'm going to tell you where. I'm going to point out first Pierre Bistro or Bistro Pierre, whichever one it is. This is quite a good option for lunch or breakfast. It can be a little bit on the pricey side, but it's more of the upmarket side of things. So that's quite good. If you want something a bit more cheap and cheerful, you've got Winston's Fish and Chips. This is probably my favourite one in the town centre, at least, because my old favourite was one I loved as a kid, the Chicken Inn. If anyone remembers that, that's long gone. So Winston's is a good option. There's also Bear Grylls, which is a pretty decent smokehouse. The only thing I found in there is the service tends to be pretty quick, and the beer options, alcohol options aren't great. My final recommendation is in a cheap and cheerful category, and that's Loco Mexicano. The prices are pretty reasonable, the food's quite decent, and the portion sizes are massive, so don't get caught out over ordering. Those four all located opposite the pier on that sort of pedestrianised plaza. So those are good sort of mid to lower range options. If you want something a bit more expensive, there's the old thatched cottage, which is sort of Anglo Greco kind of fusion or Greco Anglo kind of fusion. There's also Michelangelo's, which is probably one of the best Italians in town. It was famous for being on a Channel 5 TV show quite a few years ago, but pretty good pizza and pasta. But now I am going to tell you the number one place to go and eat in Weston-super-Mare, at least from my perspective. And that is, drumroll please, Ebisu. Ebisu, the Japanese restaurant on Regent Street. I love this place. I tend to go here anytime I visit. It's great for lunch and for dinner. One of the special things is lunch. They have a bento box offer on Monday to Thursdays between midday and 3. Yeah, it's going to be more expensive than a McDonald's, but it's definitely worth it. Now, I have actually been to Japan and had sushi and sashimi over there. Now, while not probably up to that standard, it's one of the best I've had in the UK, and that includes going to Nobu and a couple of other Michelin starred restaurants. The only thing perhaps holding it back is there isn't quite the variety or exotic nature to some of the sushi options. But I have to say it's so good. The portion sizes are nice and big. The fish is so fresh. It's just been such a great find. And the katsu curry as well is also brilliant. But as you can see from here, this is the bento option. And the little aside is, as you can see from the right hand side of the picture, they do bring you a fork automatically with chopsticks. So don't worry about asking for a fork and looking silly. They also have a fully stocked bar, so you can have some nice Japanese beer or sake or anything like that, soft drinks, or I can recommend the pot of Japanese green tea. It does get quite busy in there, and you can book in advance, which I recommend. The way it's laid out, you've got a couple of sort of smaller tables at the front, and then that kind of almost like a pub bench sort of sitting opposite each other, so it's not the largest of places and hasn't got the most covers, but I would say it's great. And if you're staying in Western and also maybe wanted a takeaway, they deliver. But definitely Ebisu, check it out. I can't talk about it, rave about it enough. So those are the best places to eat, at least I would recommend them. Now let's talk about where to go for a drink. Weston has a fair few rough and ready pubs, as probably expected, but there are some little gems tucked away where you might not find them. In fact, lots of locals don't even know they're here. So you remember I said about the top of the high street where the Playhouse is? There are two fantastic micro pubs on this road, and I would definitely recommend visiting them. I would stick with these two recommendations around this vicinity. There is the stage door, which is the Playhouse linked bar. That looked quite nice and swanky, but I've not been in there, so I can't really comment. But some of the other places and some of the other drinking holes around here are a little bit patchy, so just don't get confused with where you're going. My first recommendation is the Black Cat, which is at the end of the street. This is, I think, Weston's first micro pub. Good selection of ales, local ciders, and some craft beer as well. The only downside is I've not had much luck in terms of going there when it's opened. The opening time seem to be a little bit skew with, and I can't seem to track them down. So, unfortunately, I've not been here for a while, but it's definitely a good place if you can go when it's open. The next place to try it is two or three doors down, and that's Fathead Tap Room. This is a even smaller than the Fat Cat, and it has quite a quirky layout. It seems to be geared more towards keg beers, which is absolutely fine. Now, I can't remember if it's the Fathead or the Black Cat that has the most drinks on tap, but I think they've both got a pretty good selection. As you can see from here, there's quite a lot of options: lagers, stouts, some nice IPAs. I went for a summer lees, which is a nice 4%, which is kind of a nice session beer for an afternoon after traipsing around Weston-super-Mare filming. The final point is the Fathead has a long, long list of bottled and canned beers from around the world, so you really are spoilt for choice. So for my next option, it's the Duke of Oxford, and we walk all the way to the other end of Weston-super-Mare High Street. The Duke of Oxford used to be a little bit run down and rough, but in the last maybe 5 years, I think it was a bit longer, seems to have had a revamp. The staff in there are all really nice. It's a spacious pub, so there's plenty of room to sit. They have some good snacks. They have some good ciders on, some ales on, lager. So a great selection. The other thing they're actually good at is food as well. I've had a fantastic Sunday roast in here, so you should definitely pop along to the Duke of Oxford if you are this end of the high street. So, my final suggestion for a pub to enjoy a drink is a bit like the Duke of Oxford, another revamped one, which is the Fork and Ale. The Fork and Ale used to be, I think, linked or affiliated with RCH, which was a brewery which I think has closed down, followed by Pitchfork, I think, sorry. That was what it was rebranded as. Even so, they still usually have a good selection of world beers on. They always have a good selection of ales on, and they also do some fantastic food. So hot dogs and burgers are especially good. And this is again sort of medium-sized pub, lots of high tables, which is maybe not the best if you're a little bit uneasy on your feet. But again, staff are super friendly and brilliant. And I forgot to add a little bonus, which is something I've not found for a long time. Both the Fork and Ale, and I mentioned earlier the Fathead Brewery, they do loyalty schemes. So you buy a certain amount of beers and you get a free one, which means if you or your family are coming to Weston for a week or so, you can rack up some nice free drinks along the way. So we've covered where to eat, where to drink. Now, a little bit more of a tricky subject, which is where to stay. That in front of me is the Grand Atlantic Hotel. Despite its name, it's far from grand. We have stayed there once and it was quite underwhelming. In fact, a lot of the hotels in Weston are pretty run down, pretty gaudy. I'll take you through some of the ones I've stayed at, and also I'll give you one that was quite nice. But yeah, the Grand Atlantic, probably not on my list of things to do. Another one that was unimpressive was the Midland Hotel. Very kitsch, very dated. And a lot of these hotels along this promenade have seen better days. One that's kind of okay is the Old Colonial, which is a Marston's pub. That's yeah, that's passable. It's still not going to be five-star luxury. The other place we did stay was the guest house up here called Richmond Hotel. That was again passable, but we got called out because we said we ordered an ensuite room, and there was an ensuite room. It's just the ensuite wasn't in the room; it was down the corridor. So not ideal, but you live and learn. You might even be better off going for a known brand such as Cabot, which is Weatherspoon's Premier Inn, or the B&Bs. There probably are quite a few nice B&Bs knocking around. It's hard to find. The one I did stay at, which I really rate, is Timbertop Suites. it's a little bit of a way up the hill, so if you're not the strongest on your feet, it could be a bit of a pain. But the rooms were lovely, the staff were brilliant, the breakfast was a fantastic spread as well. So I can definitely recommend that as one of the best places we've stayed in Weston. So here I am in Wilbury Woods. This is a nice little spot if you want to get out of Weston town centre, if you get bored of the glitz and the glamour of the seafront. There are actually quite a few fun places around Weston-super-Mare if you want to get out and do some fun things. Sorry, I'm just make sure I don't step in a puddle. So let's talk about some of them. First off, you can go over to Sand Point, which is Sand Bay. I mentioned uphill. Uphill is towards the far end of Weston-super-Mare Beach. That is, again, a lovely little town. Very pretty, got a nice little church on a hill, and there's sort of a kind of wetlandsy sort of area around there. So if you want to do that, that's great. In terms of outdoor activity, not just Sand Bay, you've also got Breen Down, which I mentioned earlier. There is another great place called Crook Peak. And generally just have a look around, because there's some really nice walks and countryside around this kind of area. One tip is that a lot of these places are pretty remote, so don't expect to have a ton of shops and amenities nearby. So take plenty of water and make sure that you bring a packed lunch. You are close to some fun cities, so for example Bristol and Bath, those about 30-35 minutes on the train from Weston. You can also get a bus or drive to Wells, which is a really pretty city where they filmed Hot Fuzz. Fantastic place, amazing cathedral, really lovely countryside. Cheddar, of course, Cheddar, how can I forget Cheddar? Cheddar Gorge, it's like the Grand Canyon, just not as grand, but Cheddar's a lovely little town as well. Some really nice places to eat, in addition to sort of going up to the gorge and walking around there. Be careful, obviously it can be quite steep and a little bit hazardous in the wrong type of weather. One last extra special one for you would be Steepholm, which is this island in the channel that looks a bit like a whale. Now, trips to Steepholm are not every day. They can be quite rare, and very much depending on if you're in town when the weather's right, the tide times are right, and all that kind of stuff. But needless to say, this is a pretty important place. It's quite raw, so there's not much over there in outside of the pure nature. So it's a wildlife reserve. So in terms of flora and fauna and animals, it is a very special place to visit. I visited once when I was a child with the cubs, and I would love to go back. So if you are in town, check the times, and if you can get over to Steepholm, please do. I so want to go back there. Okay, so that's my little wrap up for Weston-super-Mare. Actually, probably the longest video I've ever done, but hopefully that's given you some guidance to have some fun and see what is in this great turd town.